Welcome to the Happy Lawyer Project. I'm your host, Akoma Mronu, and I created this show to help lawyers find happiness in life with a law degree. Together with my guests, we provide the knowledge, skills, insight, inspiration, and encouragement you need to find you're happy. Today's episode is brought to you by our wonderful sponsors over at Felix Gray Glasses. I fell in love with my own pair of Felix Grays when I was sitting in one of those really long presentations and noticed that I didn't have a headache from squinting to read the slides. Felix Grays are not only wonderful for the eyes, but they're a stylish way to decrease digital eye strain. If you're anything like me, you're familiar with the dry eyes, headaches, and blurry vision that is all too common at the end of a long day of sitting in front of a computer screen. And these glasses have fixed all of that for me. Best of all, folks, over at Felix Gray, they offer free shipping and returns with a 30-day risk-free return policy. If you're interested in learning more, head over to felixgrayglasses.com/happylawyer to let them know I sent you. If you've been listening for a while, you know that I love to bring you the stories of people who are at different stages of their happiness journey. Whether it's the partner who's been happily practicing at the same firm for over a decade, or the entrepreneur who found happiness in a new business venture, I think it's really important and inspirational to acknowledge that happiness is a journey and not just a destination. So on today's show, I chat with Andrea Levine, who recently left the law to pursue a career in the health and wellness space. We chat about her own sometimes unhealthy relationship with food and body image, how she overcame those challenges, and what it's like to be mid-transition leaving the law. I hope you guys enjoy. Welcome back to the show, guys. I'm super excited to introduce you guys to Andrea Levine. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm happy to have you. And I think it'd be great if you could just start by sharing a little bit with my listeners about who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure. So like you said, my name's Andrea. I was a corporate attorney for about 7 years. I kind of always thought I'd go into law, took exactly that path, went directly straight through from college to law school. And then I practiced antitrust law in New York City. And now I've recently left to pursue a career in health and fitness, specifically doing wellness coaching and group fitness instruction. So spinning, high intensity interval workouts, things like that.
So the health and wellness space has exploded in the last couple of years. I would say maybe even the last decade. I feel like if you look back, people were like drinking like Coke with like breakfast. You know what I mean? And like now people are drinking kale like constantly. And maybe that's just the space that I move in. But it definitely feels like there's been a shift in the way we think about our health. And I want to dive into all of that because I'm super excited. But before we go there, let's talk a little bit more about your time in the profession and why did you decide you wanted to go to law school? You said you always knew. Where did that come from?
I mean, I talked a lot as a kid. I still talk a lot, and that hasn't changed. And everybody just started telling me from a very young age. I mean, I want to say at least kindergarten, if not nursery school.
Wow.
That, oh, you talk a lot, you'd be a great lawyer. That's that like reputation right there about attorneys. And it stuck. Mm-hmm. I never really thought, I never thought of wanting to do anything else, at least not like actually. Obviously, I always thought of like being famous and rich and all of that. But as career path-wise, nothing else had really taken hold. I took, what did we call it, like moot court in high school and did really well there. So it all sort of seemed to fall into place with, I guess, my personality, very type A, very studious. So it all sort of, I don't know if it was like a, what do you call it? One of those
like self-fulfilling
prophecies.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. But it all just sort of fell into place. So I just kept letting the ball roll all the way into law school.
And I think that happens to a lot of people because as type A kind of goal-oriented people, once we have a goal set in our mind, it's really easy for us to kind of align to that goal. So for you, when did you start to have doubts about it being the right kind of forever role for you?
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone actually knows this, but in law school, I struggled with figuring out what area of law I actually would want to practice. So when you have to start thinking about your job or your internship after 1L year, and then all of a sudden you're applying for your summer associate position for the summer after your 2L year, I realized that I just kept waiting for something to click. I'd never really gotten excited about an area. And that was the first time I really started to think, do I just sort of fit the personality of the lawyers on TV, or is this actually something I want to practice full time? And
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, so I ended up, through a series of random events, I ended up interning with the Federal Trade Commission in one of their merger divisions doing antitrust law. And I will say that was the first time that things started clicking, and I all of a sudden realized that there was a place for me in this, massive field of law. But, it took struggling, and I definitely had moments of thinking this may not have been right until I got there.
So did you enjoy your practice while you were in corporate law, would you say?
The antitrust work that I did and the antitrust people that I worked with, yes.
Yep.
But there's definitely that, corporate law culture, and it's really hard that culture was a little oppressive. So it made it so even when you had the work you wanted and you were working with the people that you loved, it always felt like there was sort of something hanging over you. I think almost if you were enjoying it too much, you were just always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Interesting.
I think. And that's just a corporate law thing in general. I mean, I know I had moments thinking this is as good as it's going to get, working on cases that were, big news, at least if you were an antitrust lawyer. If you were, part of the general population, maybe you didn't really care, but they were the sort of sexier cases in antitrust law with, amazing teams. And I'd still be sitting there thinking, I'm not as happy as I thought I would be.
So what did you think was missing at that point? What kind of thoughts were you having about the pieces that weren't quite right?
I always joked I was in the completely wrong profession and I really needed to go open a gym. I mean, that has been there for years. If you asked me, if money were not an issue, what would you be doing right now? I'd be like, I'd have a gym in a foreign country and you'd never see me. And that would just roll right off my tongue. I didn't even have to think about it.
And so why didn't you pursue that?
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just interested if that's something you've always said.
Yeah.
Because I have a similar thing that I've always said, and I know why I never pursued it, but I'd be interested in knowing why this is a joke that you didn't ever feel like pursuing seriously. Well,
part of it was student loans.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, right. Eventually I kind of went there, but definitely a lot of it is student loans. And I know I'm not the only one that feels that way where, because I have a lot of friends who are still paying off their loans. You kind of feel 100% stuck until you know that payment's done. Because it's a huge chunk out of your paycheck every month, and you just kind of don't feel free. It's sort of something that I like to say now. I mean, obviously this is worst case scenario, but God forbid my whole new career path just didn't pan out. I could give up my apartment, move home with my parents, eat their food, stop buying clothes, and I really wouldn't have any expenses. And I would just regroup. When you're paying student loans, there's no home base because you're still going to have that payment looming over you.
Yeah, there's no way to get to zero.
I think, exactly. So I think that was a lot of it. And at least for me, the thought of having put in all that work, having graduated from law school, being in corporate law, and then wanting to go do something like open a gym, it was like, it feels almost like you're throwing it away. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of talking yourself into realizing that there's no way that you can throw away a JD. No matter what you end up doing, you always have that education. You always have the skills that you learn. You will find a place to put them to use, and it'll make you a more valuable candidate for whatever you do next. But when you're in that world, it does feel like you're throwing something away. A really expensive.
Yeah, and it's sunk cost, right? That's the reality. It's whether or not you're throwing it away is beside the point, because if you decided, for women who decide that they're just not going to work at all. They could feel like, why did I go to law school? Why did I put all that time and effort? And perhaps, if they did take on a lot of loans, this is going to be controversial, but perhaps it was the wrong decision because it wasn't, setting them up to be able to make that decision to, step out of the workforce. But regardless of what your choice is, the decision's already been made, and you can't really justify it by sacrificing the rest of your life.
Yeah. They call it, I minored in business in college, and they call it the sunk cost.
Yep. What
you've already lost that you will never get back no matter what decision you make now, and how you have to just put that aside because it is completely irrelevant.
Exactly. And it's easy to say logically, but emotionally that's a different story.
Oh my God, I still deal with it every day. I mean, I'm still new. I'm relatively new out of law, but it's definitely something I toy with. Today, for example, was really weird. I had a meeting completely unrelated to any of this stuff. It was for the Jewish Heritage Museum in New York City. I got roped into being on the committee to plan their holiday gala. And I can say that because my friend knows that he totally roped me into it, even if he does listen to this. But they decided to hold the meeting for tonight to get the committee together at Weil Gotshal, which is one of the big firms in the city. And I'm like, I first messaged him. I was like, you're holding it at Weil? Is this like your indication to me that I made the bad decision? And then being there was kind of weird because it's like, oh my God, it wasn't so long ago that this was my life. And in fact, I walked in and my phone automatically connected to their Wi-Fi. Clearly at some point I had been in Weil and needed Wi-Fi.
Yep.
And, so you still always kind of toy with that. But again, seeing people picking up their dinner from delivery men at 8:00 at night in the lobby, I remembered, no, I definitely did not make the wrong decision.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the shows, because I think sometimes I have people on who are so far down the road or people who are right before their leap that it's really interesting for me to talk to someone who's kind of in that transition right now and to understand kind of your thought process and how you're handling that. Because even for me going in-house, I have that, because when I go visit outside counsel and I go to their swanky offices with all their swanky resources, I'm like, oh, I miss having a coffee room.
Yeah, I had to buy a printer for sure. When I left the law firm, I was like, it's probably good for you to have access to print things off your computer sometimes. And you no longer have an office to go to for that.
Yeah, there's little things like that are obviously don't justify staying, but that you don't realize that you are kind of reliant on.
Absolutely. I can't send a FedEx package to save my life. And that's really sad to say, but I can't do it. And to this day, if I had to, I would either have to call my mom, or fortunately, I'm still in contact with some of my administrative assistants from the law firm, and I might just have to call them.
That's really funny.
Yeah, it is, but it's in the sad kind of funny way.
But it's little things like that, because I definitely, there's a lot of skills that I had been delegating for years and just didn't have, I don't really run and review my own red lines, and now I have to, and I'm like, oh, this is so time consuming.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
But
or looking for help. When you're in a big law firm, even if you don't know, if you need to do something, even if it's you just always know where to look for help, or someone's always going to give you the answer. There's a department for it somewhere in that building. And recently, with having to pull together, while you're still figuring out your marketing concept, having to put it into action and not even knowing where your connections and your resources are to do it. So, for example, I launched my website this week, and I use the term launch very loosely. I published it, but then I, was informed that you can go speak with a representative from the hosting company and they'll answer some questions for you that you don't know. And it was like sitting down, I didn't even know what I didn't know.
Yep.
And I was lucky that I found her, but it's, again, this external resource. There's nobody to turn to that's telling me I haven't covered all my bases. I'm learning everything on my own, and you kind of go from having this really narrow focus of you're the lawyer, you read the documents, you write the brief, you prep for depositions and that's it. Now it's you are everything. You are the business development. You are IT. You are marketing. You are the product. You take on so many different roles, and it's completely different than being an associate in a big firm.
Yeah. Amen. I mean, I want to go into more of that, but let's talk a little bit more about the transition. So you've always known you wanted to open a gym, have always had this interest in health and fitness. I'd love just a little bit of kind of your background in health and fitness and how you feel kind of qualified, I guess, to now make this transition.
Yeah. So it's a good question. A lot of, I did get certified and I'll talk about that, but a lot of what started was my own personal experience having to figure out what health and wellness is. So, back in high school, I always grew up playing sports. I was really active. It wasn't until my sophomore year of high school that sort of starts to slow down, because you're at the age now where it's not like everybody just plays intramural sports because their parents sign them up. Now people make decisions about what their extracurricular activities are, and for personal reasons, I ended up not playing soccer, and it was the first year I had probably not played soccer since I was 5 years old, if I'm being honest. And I all of a sudden realized I was slowing down physically. I would just come home and start to study the stress of all of a sudden taking advanced placement classes in high school. And that's when I started to take note of health and fitness. So realizing that if I wasn't going to go play soccer, I shouldn't come home and eat 3 bags of Raisinets, which apparently had become my daily snack. And turning to my mom, who, always cooked us meals, was very conscious about packing us lunches and stuff, not having us eating, buying our lunches on the run all the time, looking to her to try and figure out ways I could be better, learning about nutrition and stuff. But for me, it took a really negative turn. I think all of a sudden you kind of take, I think you take all that type A personality and you focus it on nutrition and exercise. And I just went too far and ended up developing an eating disorder. So the sophomore year, I became anorexic, and, it is what it is. I won't sugarcoat it. It was awful. I lost a whole lot of weight. I lost feeling in my limbs all the time. I was always freezing. Finally turned around to my parents and was like, this can't be normal. Found myself an outpatient treatment center online at a local hospital and asked my mom to take me there. And they treated me, but in hindsight, no, I think even as a 15-year-old, I realized it was not the kind of therapeutic treatment that I think people in my situation needed. So my first example of sitting down with a nutritionist, I need to keep in mind, I had been eating maybe 150 calories a day. I would count the calories in a Tic Tac. That's where I was at when I went to the hospital. She sat down at our first meeting and was like, you need to start putting on weight. You should think about eating Oreos for dessert. And, I know that I was stubborn and I didn't want to eat and I didn't want to put the weight back on, but Oreos is just not really the answer, at least not in this situation. I'm sure there are circumstances where Oreos are the answer, and that's fine. But that was not the answer for where I was. And, I will say I think I got better and put on the weight more to spite the outpatient process rather than because of them. And a lot of it had to do with my mom. I mean, she made every meal I ate from then on. She watched me eat it. She filled out the food journal so the hospital could track it. I committed to eating, but I didn't want to do anything else. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to plan it. And she really took on that responsibility of getting me back to healthy. But I say, I didn't really do the work. I think it was a really superficial fix to a really deep problem. And over the course of years, you add on the stress of college and, forget it, law school, a whole different animal. And I would keep cycling in and out of different eating disorders for a really long time. And it was I want to say the summer of my first year as an associate at Simpson Thatcher that things got really bad again. And a year later, so it's the summer of my second year, I entered an outpatient program in New York City, and they were super about the therapeutic aspect. You weren't even allowed to talk about the food. You always had to connect your emotions to what you were feeling and how that played out into food. And sometimes, you can never just be scared of pizza. You always have to dig deep and figure out why is it you're scared of pizza. No, the answer isn't the cheese. And I think I laugh about it now. It was like a really traumatic experience going through it because I really was scared of the cheese. But so, this is a really long way of saying I never felt like I had exactly what I needed to do the work, to figure this out. Part of me had been healthy. Like I said, I grew up playing sports, but, the second treatment center I went to when I told them I wanted to run a half marathon, literally because my cousin was running one, and I thought it would be a great way to spend 2 hours with him because we didn't see each other very often. I was like, this is great. I have 2 hours of him to myself because he can't go anywhere. He literally has to finish this same race. And I thought it would be such an awesome experience. They were like, well, yeah, but do you really want to run with your cousin? Or really are you just looking for a way to burn a whole lot of extra calories? And I was like, no, I actually just feel like this would be a great experience. But you couldn't feel that it was a great experience because it went against everything they thought. So it took, years. And I think most people in the fitness industry will tell you they continue to learn and grow every day. But I finally, within the last year, I'd say, got to a place where I really understood what fitness looked like, and not exercise for the sake of exercise, but really fitness for the sake of improving strength, building the strength in your bones, your muscles, thinking more about quality of movement and things like that. And then developing, almost relearning how to eat in a way where I didn't overthink every single morsel that I put in my mouth and could start to feel, I use this term very, very loosely because there's no such thing, but normal about having a meal. And so getting myself to that place was crazy and a really long ordeal, but it made me feel like I actually understand now what I was going through at all of those different stages, what it took to get me to a place where I actually feel healthy and not this sort of misconception of what it is to be healthy where you barely eat stuff or work out all the time or view it as this constant rewards punishment cycle, but to just really appreciate your body, what it can do, how food fuels it, and how sometimes you just crave ice cream, and that's cool too. And I really just got excited to share that with people because I know everybody has their own struggle, whether it's a background with eating disorders, which I constantly now am coming across people who went through similar struggles as I did, or conversely, you have other emotional issues relating to food and, you're on a heavier spectrum or facing chronic diseases because of those issues, and just understanding how difficult it really is to grasp wellness for yourself. That's my crazy long-winded answer.
That's amazing. And I'm, so grateful for you sharing that with us because I do think that it's not uncommon for people, especially type A people, to have suffered with food-related or exercise-related issues in their past. I have a very, I think, undeveloped relationship with food. I kind of have the relationship with food of a 12-year-old boy. And I know that needs to change as I raise children because I was eating ice cream cake every day for a week and they refused to eat it with me. And I was like, this is terrible. I'm trying to force feed ice cream cake to my 2-year-old and he won't eat it with me. Why do I feel the need to pressure other people to take on my bad eating habits?
Yeah, that's part of it too, though. There's a lot of people actually who suffer with eating disorders will talk about judgment at the table and how they want to be the one who's eating the least out of everybody else who's sitting at the table. And you'll sit and you'll watch what everybody else orders to make sure that you think you've ordered the healthiest, quote unquote. So that's being super aware of what everyone else is eating, even though it doesn't actually impact what's happening to you, is part of this whole developing a real relationship with food.
I want so much to go straight to that, but I also want to touch quickly on kind of when you decided, because I don't think we've talked about it quite yet, when you decided you were going to leave law and pursue this. Like, what was that decision like for you?
Feels really fast and really slow all at the same time. This is the best way I could explain it. Sort of like I've been thinking about it for a while, and then finally, oh my God, I just did it. It was a lot of things that came together. Like I said, I did antitrust work starting about a year ago. People from, and I will say honestly, since probably my second year of law school, people were slowly leaving that practice area. And then the head of the department and his successor left within, I want to say like 3 months of each other. So that was around September to December of last year. And that was kind of my moment where the practice area was slowing down. You know, one of, certainly not my only, but one of my biggest mentors had left. And I really needed to evaluate, was my future within law? I was still thinking law at the time, but was my future with Simpson Thacher or not, if I wanted to continue practicing antitrust? Within a similar time frame, my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer for the second time, and I will tell you the second time just feels more painful than the first. At least it did for my whole family. They also figured out my dad had a tumor on his kidney, which needed to be operated on. And at that time, she had been diagnosed a good 4 months earlier, but I had a very young cousin who was 11 at the time who had been diagnosed with a rare renal sarcoma cancer, and she was undergoing chemo. So it kind of really puts your life into perspective, or just life in general into perspective, because you realize how important the people you love are to you, because now all of a sudden there's so much going on that you need to be there for them. You sometimes worry about worst case scenario. I'm lucky that everybody is done with treatment and fine and great. We just did the breast cancer walk for my sister. My dad and my little cousin were there to do it. But it really, you have to prioritize. And at that time, I realized that the law was not there. And I basically said, antitrust is slow. Let me focus on my sister for right now. And then I really started thinking, you know, just is this how I want to live my life forever? Because I constantly felt like the job was taking away from me being there for anyone else, really. And at the same time, I thought about going to follow one of my mentors who'd left Simpson Thacher. I didn't do it. If you asked me why, the only answer I could tell you was because I didn't want to.
Good enough
and that
answer
was also
for me.
Really, yeah, I mean, right? I mean, that sent up really big red flares. I was like, wait a second. You know, you've made a decision. You might need to switch firms. You have, you know, an opportunity that you could go after, and you are literally doing nothing about it. And my dad would keep pestering me. He's like, did you email him yet? Did you ask about a job? This and that. And I was like, Dad, it's not like I don't know how to email him. I do. Like, I have that capability, and I'm not afraid. I really just don't want to have to tell somebody that this is what I want to do for the next 15 years, because it isn't. And I got really tired of pretending, or maybe it was that at that moment I realized how terrible it sounded to me to be doing this 15 years from now.
But it was almost like you could do nothing and see where the chips fell. Do you know what I mean? And you didn't want to actively pursue it anymore.
Yeah, I was waiting. I mean, if something else had come along, would I have, you know, done something about it? I might have.
Yep.
But yeah, like you said, actively having to chase a career in law
was no longer appealing.
Yeah, it wasn't. And around the same time, my friend told me I should be a life coach. And she said that because of the background I've had with my eating disorder struggles and finding a way to work through it and overcoming obstacles. But I did some research on life coaches, and not to say that this is really all life coaches do, but I kept getting articles about relationship advice. And I'm like, I am the last person in the universe that should be giving relationship advice. So no, I shouldn't be a life coach. But you know, you Google enough times and you end up in that black hole. And I came upon wellness coaching, and I was like, that I could get behind. And so all of that together, then I randomly took off to Europe on vacation and was rock climbing in Spain. And it was the first time I'd rock climbed outside. And part of me just sat there and was like, I don't know how to reconcile this part of me with the part that sits in an office for 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day. And so I came home and decided that I wouldn't. And we were going to change paths and see what that looked like.
This is why people have to go on vacation.
Seriously. It is amazing what your mind can do when you are out of your comfort zone, away from your like regular stressors, and then facing all sorts of new stressors, like being halfway up the mountain attached to a rope and being like, oh my God, how did I get up here?
But also when you're in a place where there's no expectation about who you are or how you're supposed to be, and it's almost like you get to reinvent yourself for a short period of time and just be whoever you want to be for that week, and your mind gets to be creative in that space. You're not the first guest I've had who went on a vacation and came back and quit their job.
Really? That's amazing. I'm going to have to go back and listen to that. I mean, so I don't know anyone else who's done that, but I wholeheartedly believe in the like mental clarity that comes with taking yourself out of your comfort zone and out of the things that you're used to. I mean, this will sound like a small example, but I know for me it was huge. Before I left for my bar trip, which people who don't know, after you take the bar exam, after law school, you're supposed to just go away on vacation for a while and celebrate the fact that you just took the bar. Whether or not you pass is irrelevant. You just go away. And before that, I had, as part of my disordered eating, a sort of addiction to dry cereal. And it was something I wanted to work on because I just felt beholden to a type of food, and that was uncomfortable. But I didn't know how to break it. And then all of a sudden I went to China and Thailand, and like dry cereal is not really a thing over there. And I'm eating like pumpkin soup for breakfast. That's not actually what it was, but it had pumpkin and rice and broth. And so, and I don't even know what I ate in Thailand for breakfast, to be perfectly honest, but it suffice it to say it wasn't dry cereal. And I came home being like, oh my God, like I don't actually have to eat dry cereal every morning for breakfast. But it took being somewhere totally different out of my routine to challenge myself in that way and get comfortable with it. And then all of a sudden realize that it was just this unnecessary crutch when I was home. So yeah, super big plug for international travel.
I couldn't ignore. I'm such a fan and an advocate, and I take my kids as much as I can because I think it's such an important part of knowing who you are, being a citizen of the world, kind of just getting away. There's so many reasons to do it, and I'm such a fan. And I would love to transition a little now because I know a lot of lawyers struggle to find time to eat healthy. We sit at our desk late at night eating terrible food. We don't find time to exercise. And then I think there's also people at the other end of the extreme who are so nervous about that they are obsessive about their food and their exercise. And so I'd be interested if you had thoughts on kind of for people who are not, don't have a lot of mental energy to spend on thinking about health and wellness, but want to move in a healthier direction. What are and I know people always say drink more water, get more sleep, but are there like more specific things that you would recommend?
I wouldn't even tell anyone. Yeah, I would never tell anyone in corporate law to get more sleep because some days that's just out of your control. And then, it is. It really is just mean. And you're setting them up for failure because you're asking them to do something that they may not be able to do. And now they've set a goal they can't accomplish. And so that's just cruel on so many levels. The thing I'd say is start small and be reasonable. I actually know somebody who worked at my firm, and she one day turned around to me and was like, I really want to get my health in check. I'm going to cook dinner every night. I was like, no, you're not. Like, I don't even know the last time that you ever cooked dinner. And the thought that you're going to go home and cook dinner every night it doesn't even make sense
absurd
for your life circumstances. Like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You'd be eating dinner at like midnight every night. By the time you got home, cooked dinner,
the grocery shopping
went
alone
to the supermarket. So you need to be realistic. And it doesn't mean that you're taking the easy way out if you set small goals that really play into your life circumstances. It's just, taking into account where you are, what are the things that you can really do to start making yourself feel better? You can always build on top of your small successes. And you'll start feeling better as you set small goals, work up to them, realize you've gotten that under control now, maybe add on another layer. So just to give, more concrete examples around this, if you don't work out, telling yourself you're going to wake up every day at 5:30 and go to the gym isn't going to happen. As somebody who was an avid exerciser at, 5:30 in the morning, there are days when even I don't want to do it. So you're not going to jump into that, and at least not do it and maintain it for a reasonable period of time. But, you could set a goal of going outside and taking a walk at 3 o'clock every day, or, give yourself a range of 2 to 5, because who knows when, who's going to call you or send what email at 3. But just set a goal of getting up, taking a walk around the block, stretching your legs, getting some movement in, standing up during conference calls. I've actually been pacing this entire podcast. I felt like I needed to stand. Sometimes it clears my head too. But just things like that fit into your schedule already, start there. Maybe it's eating in the cafeteria more. If your law firm has a salad bar, that's where I used to get a lot of my meals, or ordering from the salad place instead of the Italian place once in a while. I feel like we're all type A, and we all think, oh, well, if we're going to do wellness, we got to do X, Y, and Z, and we have to do it every day forever and ever and ever. And that's really overwhelming and not at all sustainable, especially if you're on one end of the spectrum and now you're trying to jump to the other. So giving yourself room to grow, recognizing you're in corporate law and there are demands on your time, and you need to be flexible with what you're trying to do while also committing to doing it is a good way to start thinking about making changes. And the more you do it, it starts to become second nature. And it sounds like lip service to begin with, but it's true. If you start small and you say you just get in the habit of walking when you talk, you'll instinctively get up and start walking when the phone rings. It's sort of, this is not the best example, but, when you work at corporate law and every second of your day is a billable second, we would have the timer app on your computer, and you would always click it when you started working on a matter. If you changed to a different client, you had to click a different button so that client, the timer started running. And still, because I'm relatively new out of law, every time I sit down to do something related to this new career, whether it's working on my website, writing a blog, reading an article on fitness, I constantly reach for like a mouse to click a timer. It's like Pavlov's dog. Oh, you're going to do work? You need to start billing. It's really scary. I cannot wait for the day for it to go away.
It does go away. It took me, I think, about, I would guess, like a month maybe. But that's also because the nature of what I do is so different now that I wouldn't have had time to build. Like, I'm being in-house. It's just a different beast. So I agree. And I think that that's really great advice to start small. There's a book, and I can't recall the name of it, about micro habits. And I think one of the studies they did was that if you set the goal of just like, if you want to start running, if you set the goal of just putting your shoes on and going outside, you won't run every day, but more days than not, you will run, because by the time you put your shoes on and go outside, you're like,
yeah, okay. You're like, might as well.
I might as well run. But the goal of putting on your shoes and going outside doesn't feel as daunting. And then on some days you put your shoes on, you go outside, and you're like, nope, not doing it today. And you still met your goal.
Yeah.
So I really love that advice.
A lot of it is just building your confidence to be able to accomplish it. And when you set out to do everything all at once, you're bound to slip up somewhere. And that's just, it feels defeating. Even if the goal you've set is unrealistic to begin with, it's hard to talk yourself out of that. You just kind of feel like you failed in some respects. But if you're really honest with where you are and start taking small steps towards where you're going, I love the just putting your shoes on example. Yeah, more likely than not, you're going to start to get there.
So where can people follow you online, learn more about what you're doing? I know you said you just launched your website. Could you share that with people so that we can continue to follow your journey?
Yes, absolutely. So the website is www.andreabarrylevine.com. And you can also follow me on Instagram. So a lot more photos, some fun stuff. And that is Andrea_Barry_Levine. You can tell I like my name a lot.
It's great. A personal brand. It starts with your name, and I love it. So thank you so much for sharing your story and being a part of this project. It means so much to me to have you on today and for us finally to connect. Before I let you go, I want to ask you the question that I ask everybody that I have on the show, and that is, what do you think separates those happy lawyers from those who struggle to find happiness in life with a law degree?
I think figuring out a way to not let law get in the way of the rest of your life. I think there definitely are happy lawyers, and I know some, but I think that they are the ones that really take the time for themselves, their family, for traveling, and then you can kind of come back from those, personal self-care, social relationships, and then come back to work. Whereas if it feels like something you're doing all day, every day, that definitely feels more taxing. So the more time you can build in for yourself, I was thinking about this today. Self-care does not mean selfish. We all need some of that. And so, to the extent you can build in space for yourself, and definitely make you a happier lawyer, a happier anything for that matter.
That's great. And I think that so many people do make that assumption that self-care is for some reason selfish. So I really, really appreciate that you made that point. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Great. Thank you so much. This was so fun. Great to meet you.
Thanks so much for listening today. And if you guys enjoyed the show, I'd love for you to share it or head on over to iTunes and leave me a rating and review. I know it's a huge favor, but it's really the best way you can show the podcast some love and help me grow the show. Lastly, I'd love to thank our newest sponsor, Felix Gray Glasses. It's super important to me and my mission here at the Happy Lawyer Project to only share stories, services, and products that I feel will truly help you be wildly happy in your own lives. So I've been really excited about my partnership with Felix Gray. Not only do I feel better since buying my pair, but I've also find it easier to fall and stay asleep. And as a lawyer, you know how crucial good sleep can be. So if you're interested in learning more, head on over to felixgrayglasses.com/happy lawyer to see if they'd be a good fit for you. As always, until next time.